This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत. Hello and welcome to another episode of Decoding Victory. If I should be nervous about interviewing someone, that would be my guest for today, Mayank Chhaya, where I conduct interviews out of passion and with the small aim of spreading positivity and inspiration around. Mayank has been in this profession of interviewing as part of his journalism career for over 40 years. However, knowing him as a friend and mentor helps me calm my nerves. The list of his professional accomplishments and the people Mayank has interviewed is long and quite impressive. Mayank wears many hats on quite literally a daily basis. His posts on social media are proof to this. Does he have a magic potion or elixir for creativity? Let us find out from the man of the hour himself. Please join me in welcoming Mayank Chhaya, a Chicago based respected journalist and writer. Hello, Mayank. How are you?
Hi, Vidya. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation to come to our program.
It's a great pleasure. And as you know, Bharat FM used to be something I was associated with. I still do stuff for them. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, that is how we met through Bharat FM, and I'm thankful for that because you inspire me on an everyday basis. I cannot say that enough.
So, I really don't know how to respond to that. I'm not a naturally modest man, but I cannot handle praise very well. So thank you.
Well, you better get used to it because we are going to do a lot of that throughout the program.
Let's temp it down a bit.
All right, sounds good. Sounds good. Mayank, thank you very much. How are you doing today? How's Chicago?
Oh, Chicago is fine. It's been a bit overcast. It snowed yesterday. I think it's dry today, but it's lovely, powdery, frosted ground.
Oh, nice, nice. See, there you go. The man with the magic with words. I love all the words that you use, and I learn so much from you. And every
Uh,
time I read your post and listen to you. So it's wonderful to have you here on the program today. So I would like to know, if you don't mind, just where this all began. I usually like to know the background of my guests. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your journey from the very beginning, your childhood, whatever you would like to share with our viewers here.
sure. By the time I was born, the 20th century had completed about 60% of its time. I was born on January 6th, 1961. I'll be turning 62 sometime next month on the 6th. Was born in a city called Ahmedabad in the state of Gujarat in India. It's a state where all the giants of India's independence movement came from, be it Mohandas Gandhi or Sardar Patel or a whole host of them. That's where I was born, like I said, to a fairly financially middle class family. We are essentially from Rajkot area of Saurashtra, which is known as Kathiawar. It's still known as Kathiawar, and so that's the sort of the accent we speak when I speak Gujarati. But having lived in for an extended time in Ahmedabad, the language has changed a bit, but my natural inclination is that lilting rhythm of Saurashtra. I went to several schools because we changed homes as if we were changing clothes every day. So it's been at least a dozen schools. We changed maybe 30 homes. I
Wow.
suppose that was an indication of being financially appended, but that never really told on us for the simple reason that we were surrounded by people whose financial life in those days always seemed appended. I think that was the norm. So when everybody is not happy, you really don't know if they're happy or not. That's how it was.
Yes, that's an interesting perspective. Actually, I never thought about it that way. So, was there a particular person or anyone around you that was like a role model for you while growing up? Someone that you looked up to?
I have never had a role model in my life.
Okay.
Uh, it might come across as rather conceited or arrogant, but I really do not understand what a role model is. I suppose role model would be when you stand in front of your mirror. You have a role model right there because it begins in your brain and that's where it should be. I understand people's need for role models or mentors or gurus. I personally don't. I find it rather strange that people describe someone else as their guru. But these are views that may not go down very well, but I've been like that since my childhood.
Okay. And so moving from one place to another place, that probably added some interesting aspects of your personality, perhaps enhanced your personality in that way, and
Indeed,
maybe,
indeed, yeah. It introduced an interesting diversity, although I was, like I said, we were only in Ahmedabad.
right.
And Ahmedabad in the 60s was still a vibrant city, but a much smaller city. At the same time, though, one has to remember that Ahmedabad was the hub of India's freedom movement. That's where Gandhi perfected his satyagraha philosophy. The Gandhi ashram was the center of everything. So one grew up thinking about these issues fairly frequently. And one of the schools I went to is known as CN High School, which is Chimanlal Nagindas High School. It's a major school in Ahmedabad. And the trustee, sort of the head of the school, was a very well known Gandhian poet scholar called Jinabhai Desai. And I remember it was our uniform to wear khadi. Every morning began with interesting bunch of prayers. I am not the praying type, but I heard those. And one of the things that has stayed with me from CN High School is that Jinabhai was a great writer of haikus. Some of you may know that haiku is a Japanese form of very short poem. It has great deal of brevity. It's 575 words in the Gujarati structure. It's a different meter in the Japanese language, but in the Gujarati language, it is 575. So when I was growing up, the presence of someone like Jinabhai Desai had, I'm sure, subconsciously had some
Right.
impact on me in those days.
Yeah, as you were describing, that's exactly what I was thinking, that perhaps just being in that environment influenced you and your thoughts.
And the interesting part is, I come from a family of voracious readers.
Okay.
Be it my father, my uncle, everybody read a great deal. And interestingly, although in Gujarat of those days, the English language was introduced only in the eighth standard,
Hmm.
the alphabet began in the eighth
Oh, wow.
standard. Think about that.
Right,
Because,
right.
and which is understandable at some level because the idea was to encourage your local Gujarati language.
Correct.
But mercifully, we were exposed to the English language from childhood. All of us in the household spoke, but we didn't necessarily converse in that language. But there were books all the time, great literary books lying around. My father was an astoundingly diverse reader.
Nice.
Although he died very early, I was barely 9 when he died. So my memory is pretty far away, about 52 years ago. But I vividly remember a couple of things about him. Number one, that he was a terrific reader. Number two, he was a great raconteur, great storyteller, probably the best storyteller that I've come across, and tremendous sense of humor, rather wry. And he had a remarkable penmanship. In fact, the other day I discovered some pages of his diary. I had posted it on Facebook, and I was quite struck by the fine penmanship. Those days, I suppose, are over because we are in the era of ROFL and LOL now. So people
Right.
do not write or LMAO. The list goes on. It's an absurd list. But anyway, that's my
Right.
memory from over 50 years ago of my father writing interesting things. My uncle, who was a teacher, reading Shakespeare. So
Oh, wow.
it was in the air. It was in
Right.
the air.
Right. Right. So a young mind could be influenced by that around. Yeah.
Indeed.
Very interesting. So was your father in that profession too of writing, just like
No,
you were?
my father's was a bit of a tragic life. He was born with a condition called mitral stenosis, which is essentially a hole in the heart, which is
Oh,
not a major condition now, but it's a congenital condition. Then, in those days, it was considered rather complicated. He had 4 heart attacks. I think the second or the third one paralyzed his left half. I have never seen my father other than paralyzed. I was born after he was paralyzed. So I used to joke with my mother, how did you accomplish that with his paralysis? But that's a separate subject. I remember him only with a stick, like Charlie Chaplin. He had these huge boots because he had to balance himself. So every time I saw Charlie Chaplin, I thought of my father. And interestingly, again, my father had this habit of picking up a stick and hooking it in your collar to bring him closer, like Charlie Chaplin did.
right, right.
So that's my memory of him. And as far as I can tell, I always thought all fathers had half of their bodies the way
Hmm.
my father had, and everybody walked with sticks. So when I found that my other friends' fathers were all right, it was an interesting contrast for me. I
Right,
was thinking visually.
right, right. Did that ever bother you that your father was not the same as other fathers, or
No,
it never crossed
not
your
at,
mind?
no, not at all. For the simple reason that one hadn't seen anything else.
Correct.
I
Yeah.
mean, my other siblings, my two eldest siblings, a brother who passed away some time ago, Trilochan, and sister Pallavi, they saw him without any. I think he wasn't paralyzed then, so they
Hmm.
had perhaps a comparison, but I didn't, and my other brother Manoj also didn't. So we always thought fathers were like that,
Right, right.
who hobbled along, and he could have been a remarkable writer, but I think his condition took it away from him because he couldn't write with the other hand at all.
Okay.
He worked at the Post and Telegraph, a sort of a minor functionary,
Sure. Yeah.
but he made it up with, like I said, his reading and his sense of humor and his storytelling.
Right, right. And those genes clearly passed on to you. So you are an avid reader and you write so well and you have a great sense of humor.
Oh, how nice of you to say. Thank you.
Yeah, so we will continue this conversation. I would just like to remind our viewers to please go ahead and post your comments. If you know Mayank and if you have anything interesting to share with us, please do so. We will be happy to take your comments. We'll display them on the screen as well as read out. So thank you very much for joining, everybody, and let us continue this interesting conversation. So Mayank, I'm sorry about your dad's condition, and also you mentioned about your elder brother. Sorry about that. So there have been ups and downs in your life, I'm sure, just hearing this. So your mother must have been a strong force in your house then.
Yes, my mother, Snehata, was a force of nature. I used to joke with her. I used to tell her, I'm curious why you married. You should not have married at all. She was a completely uninhibited performer. She sang very well. She wrote reasonably well. And like I said, she had no sense of inhibition about performing anywhere, anytime, in anybody's presence. So Snellita was the one who raised all of us with the kind of enthusiasm which I'm still baffled by. I wonder how she managed, because money was always a problem. There was just no money. We were raised courtesy of my uncle Bhaskar Rai and my aunt Chandrika, who, not that they earned very well, but they managed to chip it in, and that's how we got by until such time as my brother Trilochan became an architect, and he began to support us. He was to digress, but my brother was a brilliant, brilliant mind. He was a Fulbright scholar in those days. After finishing his graduation from the School of Architecture, Ahmedabad, he went to Harvard and MIT both.
Oh, wow.
So
That's very
once
interesting.
again, that influence of thinking high was just in the air. Like I said,
Yeah.
we
Right.
didn't. We we were middle class economically, but in terms of what we were exposed to, I think it was perhaps unheard of in the Ahmedabad of those days.
Yeah, I can only imagine that. That's wonderful accomplishment by your elder brother. I wish I could talk to him too, just
Yeah.
hearing about it. Sorry about that. I'm sure you miss your elder brother. But I know that your sister, Dr. Pallavi, is also very accomplished. And I don't know much about your brother, but I know that she is quite accomplished in her own field. If there's anything else you would like to add about your other brother and sister, you're welcome to.
Yes, Pallavi is a sort of a clinical psychologist. She's a clinical psychologist worker. In fact, she has been in that profession for over 40 years now. Uh, my brother was he was in the private sector for a long time. Manoj, he's about 3 years older than I am, and he oversees a sort of a fort hotel in Rajasthan now. Sometimes he has this sense that perhaps life shortchanged him a bit, because
Oh,
he has the same kind of sense of humor and same kind of very sharp observation that perhaps you're used to from me. Like I said, it runs in the family. So
right,
it's an
right.
interesting family. We are all very uh, close, but not in a cloying sort of way. We have a sense of detachment about things, all of us.
Hmm. Interesting. So, did you have a good relation with your grandparents and other, other side of the family, as in whether it's maternal or paternal?
Oh, wonderful. No, wonderful. In fact, I didn't see my maternal grandfather, who died much before I was born. His name was Jayantilal.
Hmm.
I have great memories of my grandmother Shobha Ben. I used to, in fact, joke that if this lady had the education, she would have been the prime minister of the country. She was that phenomenal.
Wow.
That's my paternal side. Maternal side, we have had tremendously joyous upbringing from all of our mamas, as it were.
Hmm.
My grand maternal grandparents, Venilal, that is, he used to be known as Chotu Kaka, and my grandmother Indira Ben, we used to call her Masi. Like I said, they're very buoyant, joyous family. All the mamas and masis. One of them, by the way, happens to be Neela, who is Manan's mother.
Oh, okay.
So Manan is my first cousin. I'm sure Manan would bear us out. We had a very extremely warm, joyous, unhinged childhood. So I suppose that played a great role.
So you were all like kind of grew up together in Ahmedabad, but you were moving out around a lot, I
I
think.
left Ahmedabad in 1980, around 1980, 81.
Okay.
uh, I went to I went to Bombay to pursue career, and the career was always clear in my mind from my early teens. So uh, that's where I left Ahmedabad. But I do keep up with my
Yeah.
occasional visits. So
Right.
again, it's a function of money these days traveling. So one
Correct.
tries to be a bit careful.
Right, right. Yes. And now that you mentioned Manan Bhai, I must say that, thinking high, thinking far also runs in his, in his genes, I think, because with Bharat FM, he is doing a phenomenal job. So,
Manan is a hard charging guy. He's not the kind of he. If I mean, I can say this as my brother. He's a tenacious little monkey. He doesn't give up. So
correct.
and the result is right here.
Right. Yep, yep. Thanks to him, many of us have found a platform for our passion. So,
Indeed.
yeah, that's great to bring him up. And also, when you mentioned about your paternal grandmother, we used to say the exact same thing about my maternal grandmother. The kind of dynamic lady she was, the way she could bring people together, she would make connections, alliances, and she would run the household while doing everything else in the society. We would always tease her, grandma, if you had got that education, you would have become the prime minister of India. So
There are so many women who got shortchanged in that
I agree.
generation.
I
It's
agree.
a tragedy. I really believe that it's. I used to tell both my grandmother and mother. I said it's tragic that you got trapped in this almost unabashedly male chauvinistic order. You should have unshackled yourselves. I don't know why you took that nonsense.
That is so true, but I guess they didn't have many choices at that point. So that is one of the reasons why when things get hard, I do think about the era that we are in. Especially for us as women, we have to think of all the privileges that we take for granted now. That many of our grandmothers, or even before, did not, even our mothers for that. Sake. They did not have those privileges, but still they struggled and made it through with a smile on their face. I don't know how. As you said, your mother had a great energy. And
Indeed.
so, yeah. And well, one of the observations that I made was you do refer to your mother by her name, even before, right? You
Yes,
like to
it's an
call her
old
by her
habit.
beautiful name, Snehalata.
I in fact wrote a piece about it.
Yes.
There is this tradition across the world when you introduce your mother, you just say, "Meet my mother," as if she has no name, she has no angst, she has no aspirations, she has no desires or lusts or whatever you can call it as a human being. And my mother used to find it rather amusing that every time I introduced, I would say, "Meet Snellata," and then say she happens to be my mother, to make sure that she has an identity which is independent of being my mother. I mean, I find it presumptuous when children do it.
Right, right.
But I suppose the norm is to think that it's a noble thing to do, mother. Well, mothers have their own aspirations too. So let's not run away from those.
That's a wonderful perspective. I hope more folks start thinking like you do, Mayank. And, definitely, I think mothers have their own individuality. And I think in the modern era, we try to come forward and, follow our passions and try to shape our own course. But many of our mothers, grandmothers didn't have that opportunity. So I applaud you for,
Oh, thank you.
thinking about it that way and introducing her to in that sense. So, well, now that you mentioned about the post about your mother, I would like to mention to our audience members that Mayank has an excellent website, mayankchhaya.com, just as his name goes, mayankchhaya.com. Very simple to remember. Please visit it and you can read his blog. You can see all the different talents that he has that we'll be talking about briefly here in the interview. So, Mayank, thank you again for joining us. This is such an interesting conversation for me, honestly, and I'm seeing a lot of our viewers are joining as well. And I would like to just continue this conversation by asking you, so did you complete all of your graduation education in Gujarat, or did you move out of state?
No, I did my Bachelor of Science in Physics and Chemistry. That was via the Gujarat University.
Okay.
I went to a college called Siusha Science College, which was a sort of a B grade, maybe C grade humdrum school. Uh, we had teachers who were just basically going through the motions. And I always had an inclination towards physics. In fact, physics is something that animates me. That's the only subject I take with any degree of seriousness. There used to be a great New Zealander physicist called Ernest Rutherford, who won the Nobel Prize in 1908. In fact, he's the father of nuclear physics. he had once famously said that all science is either physics or philately, being stamp collecting. So I
Hmm.
think that's an interesting perspective. Everything is physics. So I graduated with that, and I don't think I had the chops to pursue physics as a career, although I would have liked to. But it was pointless pursuing it as just a sort of a teacher thing. I didn't have the wherewithals of, say, an Albert Einstein, for instance.
Hmm.
One was aiming there, and one knew that one didn't have it. But writing was something I always knew that I had a great command over, to tell the stories that one always liked. I used to be an extempore storyteller even in my school days. So every time a teacher didn't show up, they would call on me to take the class and just spin a yarn.
Oh, nice.
I used to do it as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, and it was, I'm sure you can perhaps guess that I have no sense of stage fright. I don't even know what that means. I have no nerves about appearing in front of people. I think it's to do with the fact that I've always done it.
Okay.
But journalism was a natural choice from the get go from me.
So did you go to school for that too?
What happened was, after I finished my graduation in Ahmedabad, I came to Bombay. It was Bombay then in 1980-81, and I joined something known as the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan's journalism school. And I knew it. I mean, it's absurd that there is a school for journalism, because journalism, especially reporting, cannot be taught sitting in a class. And as luck would have it, I failed in journalism. And I failed because I found it boring to be taught by a bunch of fogies who had never practiced journalism themselves, except a couple of them. But I was the only journalist from that particular batch at that point.
Hmm.
So that was quite a while ago, like I said, in 81. And while since I'm talking about journalism, I must tell you what triggered me. There was a great movie called The Odessa File.
Hmm.
I think it came out in the mid 70s, starring John Voight as a journalist. And there is a scene early on in the Odessa File where, as an investigative journalist, he's tracking down some Nazis
Ah,
in that
okay.
movie. So John Voight goes to someone and he says, his screen name is Peter Miller. So he says, I'm Peter Miller, I'm a journalist. That stayed with me. Just the idea that you can walk in and say, I'm Peter Miller or I'm Mayank Chhaya, I'm a journalist. So, as just to have some fun, when I went on my first assignment for the Free Press Journal newspaper, I'd gone to meet someone and I said, I'm Peter Miller, I'm a journalist. And they sincerely thought my name was Peter Miller. I was just having some fun at their expense. So the
Okay.
guy said, "Well, welcome, Mr. Miller." I said, "No, I'm Mayank Chhaya. I'm just trying to relive a scene from a movie called The Odessa File, which set me on this path."
Right, right. Yeah. You almost sounded like, hi, I'm Bond, James Bond.
Well, unfortunately, I'm Chhaya. Mayank Chhaya doesn't have anywhere close to that weight.
True, true. So, well, I think our interview is being received very well. We have a comment here. So, just about what you were talking about, your mother. What an interesting perspective about moms. I'll try it with my mom. One viewer says, but will stay out of reach when I call her by her name.
That's true, because they are not used to being called by their
Correct.
name.
Correct. Neither our fathers or others in the house, I think. But
Yeah.
but that's really a very very good point that you made about individuality, about mothers, how we have to think about it from that perspective. So moving on, we are getting more comments and we are having more viewers. So this has become a more interesting conversation. So you just started talking about journalism, and now I know where your interest in physics comes from. I keep wondering, you are from the time I've known you more as a person who has interviewed celebrities, especially with Bharat FM, you being on the team of Bharat FM. I have seen your interviews with celebrities, and so I thought you were more in that line. But then once I started seeing your posts about physics and you going so deep into it, I was like, man, he knows so much about it. He has so much interest. So now I know where that comes from. So you have continued that, you have kept at it.
Yeah, like I said, that's the only subject I take with any measure of
Yeah,
seriousness.
yeah.
I find everything else very trivial. Although my journalism has been very, very much hard news based for, like I said, over 40 years. I've covered all the major news stories emanating since 1981. I was in Bombay for about 9 years. Then I moved to Delhi as South Asia chief correspondent of a news weekly called India Abroad and India Abroad News Service. Then as in that role, I used to cover the insurgency in Kashmir, for instance. I started reporting on the Kashmir insurgency almost as soon as it began in
Hmm.
1989, and I did it for about 7 years. I reported on the last throes of the Khalistan movement in Punjab. I used to report from Pakistan. I used to report from Sri Lanka. So one has been around. I've seen all kinds of interesting stories, met all kinds of interesting people. It's a sort of a tangential life, and I mentioned tangential because that's going to be the title of my memoir, which I think hopefully will come sometime late next year. It's called The Tangential Life.
Yes. And you have a description to that too.
Yes.
And why is that? Do you mind sharing with our audience members what it is and why is that?
Unfortunately, we live in a time now where journalists are called all kinds of names, the worst being a prostitute. It's something that has caught on in India, especially on certain side of an ideological divide. And I find it at some point tragic, at some point amusing, because I come from an old school sort of journalism where you're driven only by facts. Nothing else drives you, irrespective of where it might lead. You are driven by facts, and that's where I come from. So, uh, tangential life is because as a journalist, you meet so many people from so many different walks of life on a daily basis. I'll give you just one example. There was a day in when I was with the Free Press Journal. It was sometime in I think '85. Uh, in the morning, I had a sort of a call with Rajesh Khanna about something. In the afternoon, there was some MLA, local MLA that I had to talk to. And in the evening, I had sort of an interview meeting with, of all people, Haji Mustan. Now, to think that in a span of 8, 10, 12 hours, you form these tangents, that struck me then that I'm not striking any enduring friendship with any of these guys. I'm just essentially forming tangents, moving on. That's been my life for the last 40 years, and that's what I find very fascinating.
It is very fascinating. I well, this is a great segue for my next question. I was wondering, you have interviewed so many, as you mentioned, Rajesh Khanna, and we know about Dilip Kumar, Javed Akhtar, and Sunil Dutt, and so many others, even Richard Gere. So, so Hollywood, Bollywood, I think you just have no bounds. You have interviewed them all. So please tell me who would be like, let's say, top three of your guests. Who would you say they are, and any interesting account you would like to mention about any of them that we know as actors or celebrities, but something that struck out, you
You
know.
mean from the movie world?
Let's start with the movie world, yes, and you
I would
can.
say, in terms of pure humanism as a human being, I would rate Devanand right up there. He was a remarkably refined gentleman. I came to know him when I was 23, and he was already in his close to 60 by that time. I remember I had gone to his office. Let me step back a bit. The way it started in '84, after the Bhindranwale problem started, after the Golden Temple action by Indira
Correct.
Gandhi happened,
Yeah.
and Bhindranwale was killed. I was doing a story on just reactions in Bombay, and I knew that Devanand was born in Gurdaspur, which was also the hometown of Bhindranwale.
Mm.
So I called Devanand one morning, and Interestingly, he answered. Those were the landline days, so rotary phones. It took
Right.
just 2 minutes to even finish dialing. So we are talking that era. And as luck would have it, he answered in his usual effusive hello. And I said, Mr. Anand, this is, I mean, I didn't have to say, are you Mr. Anand? It was obvious
Yeah.
from his style.
Right.
And I told him why I was calling, and he said, Mayank, I'm in the bathroom, I'm taking my shower, and then he holds the phone to the shower just to prove that he's not taking me for a ride. I said, no, no, Mr. Anand, it's okay. We'll talk once you finished. So he said, I'll call you back. And knowing movie stars, you know that when they say they'll call you back, it really doesn't mean anything, generally speaking.
Right. Right.
10 minutes later, the phone rings. That was Devanand. Now, that's how it began with him. And we struck up a fairly good friendship for a very long time. But in fact, I would call him one of the very few friends in the movie industry uh, for close more than a quarter century after that. That was, I would put Devanand right there. Rajesh Khanna, again, a very dear friend, remarkable man. People may find it strange to hear that, but in his private life, he was a very warm, extremely hospitable man. Uh, he would spoil you with all kinds of food. He was into those things. And we just struck up. It's one of those things. I suppose I have a knack, I think. I don't know why that is. But one, because one doesn't treat them with any measure of being starstruck. I've never been starstruck in my life. So I suppose they see that you being treated as an equal.
Right.
That's how with Rajesh Khanna. There are so many stories about Rajesh Khanna. We'll run out of time on this. But
Yeah.
again, remarkable man. The third person I would rate, and I'm not ranking them, I'm just pointing
Right.
out
Right.
interesting encounters, is
Yeah.
Dilip Kumar, of course, the great Yusuf Saab. I have interviewed Dilip Kumar 4 times, uh, and every time on the phone. I never met him. Uh, and it's what struck me as remarkable about Dilip Kumar was his erudition. The man, he didn't, he wasn't formally educated in that sense. I'm sure he went to school and had some kind of college interaction, but he was conscious of the fact that he couldn't do a lot more than he could. He taught himself so much on his own. And if you listen to some of his addresses, even on YouTube now, I don't think there is any actor uh, who is of the same peer as Dilip Kumar in terms of sheer erudition about things in life. None at all, except with the possible exception of, say, Devanand. But he had a different personality. Devanand was not a scholarly type by choice, although he could be. So these are the three interesting names.
Very interesting. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. How about non-cinema?
Oh, that's a long list. That's a
Long
very
list.
long list.
Very long. Yes. It's hard.
Since what
Maybe
jumps
one.
out at me is Dalai Lama, whose authorized biography I wrote some time ago.
Correct.
I'll give you an interest. I had gone to McLeodganj in '97 to do a cover story for my newspaper and the wire service on Tibetan refugees, and host of others issues. As part of that, I had an interview with the Dalai Lama. Uh, I remember I was told by his aides that when you talk to him, do not hold anything back. In fact, the tougher the questions, the more exciting he becomes. He does not like boundaries of that kind, which was in itself quite refreshing,
Right.
coming from a guru, as it were. So I started with this observation to him that I'm as enlightened as you are. The only difference is you were chosen. And I mean, I was saying it half in jest, half seriously, and he guffawed. He got the humor in it. And then it became such a fascinating conversation. Then I carried the cover story, and that opened the way for my seeking authorization to do a book on his life and times. And it happened in just barely 2 days that he granted me the authorization. So Dalai Lama is certainly one of the names that I would mention. Another would be someone like, say, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, whom I knew fairly well. Now, to some of your viewers, it may seem like, look at this guy dropping names left, right, and center, but these are the realities of a journalist's life,
Yeah, right, right,
especially those journalists who take their profession seriously, without prejudice, without ideological bent, or without just generally opinion that they keep to themselves. So Vajpayee was another very interesting interview material. Advani, then there were a whole VP Singh, there were Rajiv Gandhi, there were a whole host of them. They
right.
are all very interesting, remarkable figures in their own right. So it's a, like I said, it's a big list. On the women's side, even someone like, say, Shabana Azmi, for instance, or Malika Sarabhai, or even I remember long ago I'd met Dimple Kapadia for something. Normally I didn't do those interviews, movie star interviews, but there was an assignment, so I had to do it. And the first thing I told Dimple Kapadia was, "Why are you so good looking?" And she didn't know what to say, and she was stunning in person. So these are interesting things that you come across as a journalist.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we can keep listening to you all day long, Mayank. You have so many interesting accounts to share with us, and especially about these people that we have seen in a different light, right? You have seen them otherwise. So
Right.
that's wonderful to hear. And we are getting more comments. One from Rashmi Kiran, a friend in Cincinnati. She says it's a very nice conversation. Being a journalist was one of her dream jobs. And I think she's in a finance sector now.
I see.
And oh, and my sister Girija tuned in from Bangalore. She says, some of us listening to this are indeed blessed to hear you, Mr. Mayank.
Oh, that's very big of her to say. Please thank her.
Of
Thank you,
course.
Girija. That's, as always, the two sisters are very generous.
You're kind. So, Mayank, why do you not like us calling you Mr. Mayank or Mayank Ji? It took me a while to start calling you by your first name.
Well,
Just knowing your reputation, knowing your.
no, I understand where the tradition comes from, but respect is inherent in the name. There is a reason why people have names, right? Uh, the name itself has its own respect. Be it Vijaya, be it Amitabh Bachchan, be it Dalai Lama, they all have their names. So why? I mean, there is an absurd trend in India, especially in the movie industry, all movie industry, be it Tamilian, Kannada, Telugu, Hindi, especially Hindi, where people address them as Amitabh Sir. What the hell does that mean? Either say Mr. Bachchan, or what is Sir after the name? What's the point of that? But it's caught on, and if you don't say it, they get a bit turned off.
Yes, yes, I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, it
So
also depends on who's receiving it, right? Who's on the
these are
receiving.
just digressions that I think about.
Right, and that's what makes you more and more fascinating to us. So, well, we will be joined by Haya, who is Mayank's daughter, in just a little while, and also friend of Mayank, a long-standing friend, Mr. Jagdish Ratanani. We are waiting for him as well. So once they come in, we will add them
I
to our.
can ask. Haya is right here. In fact,
Yes,
I'll make way for her.
yes,
She'll
please.
take my place.
I hope you can be on the screen as well.
I'll try and stand
We can,
behind.
yes, if not possible, just Haya, that's fine.
Sure.
So please welcome Haya Chhaya. She is the beautiful daughter of Mayank Chhaya. She is 20 years old, a student at University of Illinois Urbana, right, Haya?
Yeah, in Urbana-Champaign.
Welcome to this
Thank
program. How
you.
are you today?
I'm pretty good. If I'm being candid, I did wake up like probably 45 minutes ago, so
Well,
I'm
at least 45 minutes ago. I was thinking this is too early for you youngsters. I was feeling a little hesitant to even have you here at
no,
this early.
yeah, no, it was totally fine. I usually wake up around this time for my classes anyway, so
Okay. Thank you again for joining.
yeah.
So, well, I don't know how much of this conversation you were able to hear, but we are fascinated with your father's journey. And he is, from our perspective, he's a very cool man. Now, you as a daughter would know more and probably have a different angle to it. So share with us a little bit more about what you think about your father. Do you think he's a cool dad? That's the
I
first question.
think I think that he certainly is a spunky character. I think like growing up, I was able to see how different he was from other fathers, and how eccentric he was compared to other fathers, which isn't a bad thing. It was like, you know, it was a nice change of pace. So in that aspect, I think that he was very. I mean, if you want to say, yeah, like he was very cool. Um, and he was relatively, hands off, free range. He just was kind of the type of person to encourage my brother and I to do whatever we saw fit with our lives. And I've grown up hearing all the stories, so I did hear a lot of the interview, but I knew a lot of that already because we like he likes to tell a lot of stories, so he's always been like that since I was little.
Does it get a bit too much for you as a daughter sometimes?
No, I think not that it gets too much, but you get used to just being. Depends on my mood of the day. If I'm in a good mood, I'll be interactive. If I'm in a bad mood, I'll just turn on my like, yeah, yeah, and then my head nods. Just keep the conversation going.
So interesting to hear you, Haya. That's wonderful. So, is there something in particular that you'd like to share about your father, which to you is a inspiration or something that you would like to carry on?
I think the one thing is how successful he was when he was younger, and how he carried through with that success and was also very humble throughout it. The one thing that I noticed is that he never raised me and my brother and I to be uh, uppity about anything, which I personally I appreciate because I think for me personally, people like that I don't really get along with very well. So I think in that sense, how he was able to maintain his reputation and composure and could also still be a decent person. So I mean, I don't have any stories off the top of my head, but that was just at least something like based on what he's told me about his life, that's just something that I find very intriguing and that I'm very happy to know.
Lovely, lovely. So we have to be as young parents here on this side of the screen have to take a page or two from your father's parenting book. It is so hard to give that control to children, especially when they're growing up. But looks like, hey, you're doing great here, and you have a smile on that beautiful face of yours, and
Thank
sharing
you.
these stories about your father with so much excitement. So yeah, I think that he did a great job.
Yeah, I would say so.
Wonderful. So very happy to have you here, Haya. Would you like to share anything else about your father before we let you go?
Um,
We find him a fascinating person, and I have to say this again, a person that we get inspiration from every day. Just looking at his posts on social media, I have no idea where he gets his energy and creativity from. Maybe, as I said, he has a magic potion or something that we would like to have a little bit of. But he is really amazing, inspiring us every day in different ways, whether it is his singing, whether it's his writing, interviewing, just his knowledge and his wit, of course, wit
yeah.
too.
Yeah, he's very young spirited.
Yeah.
My friends love my dad. They call him Papa, the same as me. Um, just because I think I think it's also good to see the kind of positive impact that he's had on my other friends and other people I hold close to me, because I think I had the great privilege of growing up with someone who's very, very accepting of everything, very non-judgmental. And some of my friends did not receive that same sort of, it was just different for them. And so I think for them to come here or to our home, they find my dad, I think, a safe space. So that's something that I've always recognized, is that he's a very comforting presence. My friends will tell him their drama and ask him for advice. So yeah, so I think just in general, the way he treats people around him he's always very, very friendly, and he's always been he's been very good to the people around me. So I appreciate that.
That's wonderful. Wonderful to hear. I guess I should introduce all of my children to Mayank so they have a nice, you know, other than the parent, right? I can be strict sometimes. I can drive them crazy sometimes. At least they have a Mayank uncle to go to. That
Yeah.
may help.
Yeah, he'll be the fun uncle. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you again, Haya. And
Thank
by the way,
you.
before I let you go, I want to know from you, you have a lovely, lovely name, right? From the first time I heard it, Haya. How do you like it? Have you ever had any discussions about your name with your dad?
I've had a lot of discussions about my name with him.
Okay.
Um, I mean, I asked him why he chose that name, and he just said he said it on a whim. He was like, "It's Haya." And right after I was born, um, I've had a lot of discussions about my name in general throughout my life because it's a little unique that my first and my last name rhyme.
Right.
Um, and it's also a little unique that my middle name might also rhyme because it's his name.
Okay.
So I've definitely had. I think when I was younger, I would be like, "Why did you name me this?"
Right. Right.
But now that I'm older, I think I think more people compliment my name. So I always ask him what was the reasoning behind my name and why he chose it and what that means to him.
It is beautiful. It is
Thank
beautiful.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And my daughter, who is 8, Avani, she has a problem with her name sometimes because her friends destroy it. They call it Avani instead of Avani. But
Oh,
yeah, I hope one day she grows up and says the same thing as you. You know, she does love her name right now, but she doesn't like to use it as much. So hopefully,
yeah,
as
she
she
will.
grows up,
When she's old,
yeah,
like when she's around my age in high
correct,
school, she
correct.
will.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Haya. It was lovely talking to you. Hope to
You
have you
too.
again on
Thank
another
you.
episode of our program. Best wishes to you for your college and your future. Please stay in touch with us.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
All right. Thank you so much, Haya. Take care.
You too.
Yep.
Thank you, baby.
And while Mr. Mayank comes back, well, Mayank comes back, please, I would like to remind all of our audience members, kindly keep sending your comments. Thank you very much for joining us. We do have a comment here. Mayank, I recently heard a speech of Dilip Kumar in Hindi, Urdu, and English mixed, and I was very impressed by his articulate speech, just along the lines of what you mentioned about him. Thank you very much, Mayank, for having Haya over. It's
Oh, no, it
always
was lovely of you to indulge her.
yeah, no, I mean, for us, it is great to hear about our guests from their close family members and friends. And we are still waiting for your friend to join.
Yeah, let me remind him, if you don't mind.
No, no, please go ahead. And
I'll ping
meanwhile,
him on Facebook.
yes, yes, please go ahead. Meanwhile, I'm going to share Mayank's website here for our viewers. And please go to mayankchhaya.com and you can see different things that Mayank is involved in. His blog, he has links to everything here. He has link to his YouTube channel, and he has linked to his debut single, which is essentially the song that he wrote, which is now made into a video. So it's really beautiful. Please listen to it. It's sung by Suparna Chakravarti, a beautiful, beautiful singer. So Mayank is a lyricist and composer of this. And it is the musical composition and arrangement has been done by Anupam Mithun Malik. It's really beautiful. The cast is Shruti Patil. So kindly watch when you have a chance to. And please go ahead and take a look at his blog as well. He has many articles and blog pieces that are really interesting to read. So some issue going on here in my side of the screen. So I hope you can still see it. Yes, mayankchhaya.com. And also, if you go to the main page, you can learn more about Mayank's book about the Dalai Lama that he just mentioned briefly, the authorized biography. You can also read more about his journalism career, his reporting. He has a lot of wonderful, beautiful paintings that he makes on a daily basis. That is what I was talking about, creativity. He is very creative. He paints as well. So you can find all that on mayankchhaya.com. Please visit it at your leisure. So coming back to Mayank.
That
Hi,
was very
Mayank.
nice of you, Vijay. It's greatly appreciated.
Yes, of course. I mean that this is just the tip of the iceberg. You have so much to offer that I was like, what is the best way to give a snapshot? And then I was like, you have done such a fantastic job with your website. Let me just share that. So
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
yes.
No, I think you earlier wondered about, I'm sure in jest about sort of magic potion. There is really no trick. The trick is to just let yourself go. If you have any creative impulses in life,
Yeah.
my only suggestion would be to let yourself go.
Hmm.
If you are creative and if you do not let yourself go, trust me, it will not happen. There is a measure of shamelessness about it in the sense you don't care whether you succeed or fail. You
Right.
just
Right.
do it, right? That's the trick.
That's
So
a good
be it
tip. Yeah.
painting or writing or poetry or singing, you just do whatever fancy catches you.
That is a good tip, definitely. But at the same time, I would still give credit to your talent because not everybody can just get up in the morning at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and just come up with a new tune or come up with some
Yes.
new lines to write and just hum it so easily as you do. Um, and also, the paintings, you can just take a pencil. I've tried it too, Mayank. You can't just come up with a sketch the way you do.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's very nice of you.
That
I suppose it's just there. I
yes.
haven't really thought about it much.
Right, right. So, moving on with our interview, a few other questions that I would really like to ask you, address. Firstly, the Dalai Lama. So, let me mention to our audience members that Mayank is an authorized biographer. I think it's the only authorized biography of the Dalai Lama. The book is originally Man, Monk, Mystic. It has been published in 24 languages around the world, including in America by Doubleday. He has two other books to his name, and this book has been updated with four new chapters under a new title, the Denoma, the 14th Dalai Lama's Life of Persistence, and it is available at Amazon. So let me quickly ask about that. How did you come up with this title? The word itself is so hard for me to say.
The denouement is sort of the final conclusion of an act, right? That's
Right,
what it
right.
typically means.
Correct, correct.
After I wrote the first one, which
Yeah,
was Man, Monk, Mystic, it explored the Dalai Lama from these three vantage points.
yeah.
It's interesting that one man can have three different sides to him. Uh, and once that phase was over and I updated it with new chapters, it was a time when I could see that he's entering the twilight of his life. I'm sure he has a long life, but in terms of
Right.
just sheer physical fragility and
Yep.
frailty, uh, the inevitable would happen someday. So I see this as sort of that phase of his life, the denoma, the conclusion. Of course, in their case, there is no denoma. They reincarnate in certain forms. In the sense, I think people get confused when they talk about reincarnation in Buddhism.
Hmm.
It's the reincarnation of a particular trait. It's not necessarily the reincarnation of the same person, although it could be that as well. So, I mean, 14th could become 15th at some point after he passes, typically after 9 months or so, they get
Hmm.
reincarnated. It's an obvious subject. It was an obvious subject for me to explore. And fortunately, the Dalai Lama and his office were remarkably indulgent towards me in granting me a lot of time with him. I spent several hours. I traveled with him quite a bit here as well as in India, and he's an all-round a joyous figure. It's difficult not to take him personally. At the same time, you recognize that he comes from a sort of a detached philosophy of Buddhism. So it's an interesting dichotomy. He's a very extremely amiable, friendly man. At the same time, happens to be the Dalai Lama as well. So there are two conflicting aspects to him.
Right, right. I mean, Mayank, I don't know how much you believe in blessings, but I personally feel you have been so blessed in life, especially, having spent this kind of time with a person of the stature of the Dalai Lama. That is no ordinary accomplishment, no ordinary feat. It has to be a blessing. It doesn't happen to everybody. Most of the people in the world just like to see him as a picture or a video, maybe perhaps now with the internet around. And I was blessed to get his personal blessing in Moscow when my father was there, as you know. So that was a rare thing to happen, just once in a lifetime kind of thing. And you got an opportunity to sit with him for perhaps months while you got this book or biography in shape, in good shape. And so I just feel like you have this blessing to meet all these great people, especially the Dalai Lama. So I am very impressed. I'm really
It's not a very popular view. It may come across as I'm being a dick, if I can use that expression. But I suppose it was an equal amount of blessing for him too. I, I mean, there is a sense of equality here. I mean, when I told him that I'm as enlightened as you are, it was only part in jest.
right, right,
Because, like I said, I generally don't believe in blessings at all. I'm not the believing type.
right,
I've never
right.
believed in anything.
Yep.
But you can see why he is what he is. I'm extremely aware of that fact. But at the same time, at a personal level, I mean, I after the book came out, since you mentioned, I had several rounds of interviews in the U.S. on NPR and several other newspapers and other media outlets. And one recurring question that I had to answer with some measure of trepidation is along the similar lines, in the sense that, so how did he influence you? Uh, and I'm a factual man. I'm a very matter of fact man. So I said there was zero influence. There was no influence. I have not been influenced by anything of that sort. So, but it's a remarkable encounter. The most interesting part for me was to interact with the Dalai Lama on the subject of quantum mechanics. Buddhism has profound ideas which are very similar to what you find sometimes in quantum mechanics. Of course, Hinduism too has it. So it's the tradition. That's what I found fascinating. In terms of blessings, I'm not too sure, or even being influenced in any way at all, because one has to look at it this way. By the time I met him, I was in my 30s. If you are not fully formed by that age, there is a fundamental problem. Although I thought I was formed almost immediately after I was born. So that's how I've approached life.
Okay, so this is very interesting conversation. I'm sure some of our viewers are also wondering about your personality now, Mayank, hearing these viewpoints. Now we would have to talk to your close friend, good friend, Mr. Jagdish Ratnani, who has just joined our studio. So
Oh,
let
how
us go
nice.
ahead. Yeah, let us go ahead and welcome Mr. Ratnani to the program, and we can talk more about Mayank there. Welcome, Mr. Ratnani. How are you
Hi,
doing?
hi Vijaya. Nice to have you here. Hi, hello, Mayank.
Whoa,
Nice
Jagdish,
listening in. Yeah, good.
that
This is a
rich
nice and
mustache.
interesting show. Very interesting show. Vijaya, I'm
Thank
sure you got some surprising views there.
Yeah, well, I have known Mayank for about 2 years now, I would say, and
Okay.
I've been a follower of him on social
No, no, no.
media.
Please, please don't say that.
So I know his viewpoints, and that was right from the get go. I mean, I've been so impressed with his vast knowledge and his experience. So I have been wanting to interview him. He's made me wait only for about 2 years, but I'm
I
so
know.
glad this has happened.
He told me that. He told me that. That's
Yes,
really
yes.
nice of you, Vijaya. Yeah, good.
No, no, it's a
Yeah.
pleasure. It's a pleasure. And thank you so much, Mr. Ratnani, for joining.
Before you, sorry to interrupt, before you
No
talk to
problem.
Jagdish, I
Yes.
want to say a couple of things about him. Jagdish and I are very dear friends of nearly 40 years standing. Jagdish is a world class journalist. He can hold his own anywhere in any media situation, anywhere in the world. Again, completely driven by facts, again, a completely unabashed liberal, the way I am, make no apology for that. And we are, in many ways, very similar. So you might find some convergences. Go ahead, Jagdish.
Sure, sure. And Vijaya, please
Lovely.
call me Jagdish. Yeah,
Okay,
Mr.
sounds
Ratnani
good.
sound too officious. Yeah, go ahead.
Sounds good. I don't want to offend anybody, so I want to take the
No, no, no,
safer
no, no, no,
route.
no, 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 no. Please
So
go ahead.
yeah, so Jagdish, let me quickly introduce. Already Mayank has introduced you to our audience members, but I would also like to repeat that Jagdish Ratanani has been a journalist for close to 4 decades, and he's reported major stories out of India for several national and international news media. Currently, he is editor, columnist, and director at the foundation of the Billion Press, which is a specialized source of op-eds and long-form articles. He is also a faculty member at the SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai, as well as the director at the Association of Sustainability Practitioners in UK. Welcome, Jagdish, again to the
Thank you,
program.
Vijaya. Thank you. Thank you.
So, we would love to hear your views and maybe perhaps a little bit more about Mayank. Any interesting stories that come to mind from your long association with him? Anything that
Yes,
you'd
yes,
like to share with us?
yes, several of them, but I'll point to one and let me come to it. So
Sure.
I'll say first and foremost, obviously, Mayank is a dear friend. I mean, I worked with him for 4 decades, as he correctly said. I had some of my best years in journalism working with him. We were working in a small paper called the Free Press Journal in Mumbai, and we often worked very closely. We did many breaking stories. We could beat the best. We have often done it. It was nothing unusual for us to do that. And as young reporters, probably in our early 20s, I think we could, in some senses, set the city on fire. So Mayank has been a co-conspirator and a colleague and a wonderful one at that. So 40 decades is the journey. So he's a friend first and foremost. I think nothing describes him more than when I call him a friend. The second thing, he went on for the Free Press. He's very versatile. You would have seen, Vijaya, the range of work that he has done. Not to speak of the Dalai Lama books, the Gandhi song, which itself as a topic is very exciting and interesting. Vaishnava Janato, a full-fledged movie on that, for which I understand he came to India. He went to the locations where Narsi Mehta was around. He filmed there. So just imagine all this is done as non-profit work. I don't think there's a lot of money in this, but sheer interest. So he's very versatile. Television, media, cinema, his love for Bollywood, his deep insights into movie actors, his ideas of journalism, television, radio, you name it, and he has done it. So versatile is the second word that comes to me. The third, when you talk to Mayank, you may get the idea of a person who's steeped in some individualistic ideas of how you make your own world for yourself. But that doesn't really do justice to some kind of a collectivistic notion where he has contributed to a larger community. And I'll tell you a very small story on that. I remember, again, long years ago, 4 decades ago, as we were in that small place called Free Press Journal, which is the smallest of Indian papers, has gotten smaller over time, I think, or I suspect. All media, print media, are going down. And those were not the days of computers, or those were not the days we had those PDAs or tablets, and you wrote your telephone numbers on a paper diary. Okay, so you can imagine a city newspaper would have the finest collection of telephone numbers because you need to talk to them every day. And we had a dog-eared, torn, tattered diary, and there was this huge task of wanting to translate that to a new diary so that you preserve the numbers. Where do they go if the page tears off? And pages were falling off. We'd take them from the ground and put it up, and nobody would do the task until one fine day. I think Mayank went, got a new diary, sat down for hours, translated every single thing into a new diary, and lo and behold, the entire news desk, the entire city team had a brand new, reliable source because our pages were missing no more. And he did it without anybody asking him. He did it without expecting anything. It was quite several hours of work. But that is Mayank. So that was a very collectivistic Mayank who would otherwise celebrate a very individualistic idea, being in America for a long time. And there, you can see a bit of contradictions, but much to be celebrated there as well. I don't know whether Mayank remembers this, but I do distinctly
No,
remember this.
now that you reminded me, I do. But it's interesting. This has been a topic of conversation between Jagdish and I for a long time. Collectivist and individualistic. Uh, he sees sort of a dichotomy, but I saw that as an individual act. Uh, I wasn't necessarily doing it for the rest of the crowd. I was doing it because it was annoying to have the pages flying around. But it's a point of view, sure.
I wonder, Vijaya, what do you think of this?
Vijay, your
I
Yeah,
microphone.
can't hear
yeah,
you.
yes. Sorry about that. So this is exactly what makes Mayank so interesting to all of us. So
Yeah.
we
Very true.
want to we want to get deeper into it. I keep telling him sometimes, like, I want to get inside your head and see what's going on there with the kind of like
Yeah.
diverse posts and the
The other thing
different.
about Mayank that can be said with not as much pleasure is
Yeah,
that he probably hasn't received, in the conventional sense, the
correct.
recognition that a person of his versatility should have or would have or might have. And that's not a very pleasurable thing to say, but sometimes it does take time for talent to be picked up, or many a talent doesn't always get picked up. And
Yeah,
Mayank probably doesn't compromise or doesn't do many things that others would do to get ahead. So in that race, I think we are poorer for not having him do more or have more resources at his command where he can do, so many other things. I
I agree.
personally have been trying to get him interested in a project in India, and we've always wondered, these are going to be non-profit, just projects out of interest in journalism, and we won't be always able to do that because the recognition that I think Mayank deserves, and many of us in the circle of friends would feel the same, has eluded him for whatever reasons, and that is a very complex kind of a conversation. And that's another thing that probably is not a very happy thing to say, but is also the reality that we have to live with and accept.
Yeah.
And maybe it is a very special Mayank who doesn't always sync with a world that is not so special, and you could look at it that way. Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
that I'm
yeah,
overwhelmed, Jagdish, for saying that. Only Jagdish Ratnani would say that, and I mean he's right about it. If one goes by the traditional definitions of success, it's
correct.
it's absolutely spot on. He's right. There is no denying it. But I like I said, my preoccupations have always been rather grandiose in terms of cosmos. So my marvel is the universe. The rest is, uh, I suppose, too small. The neighborhood is too small
Yeah,
for me.
yeah.
Uh,
So that's interesting because a lot of the work I do, in terms of my reading, writing, or action research, is essentially looking at a world that is, not really always objective, has large amount of subjective elements. The cosmos is interesting. The cosmos is complex, and in fact challenges the scientific view. And says there is more to the world than just a few equations can explain. So, and that goes back to ideas of Indian spirituality. So yes, I would agree that our own individual aspirations and our own ambitions should take our time, and we needn't be bothered about how others react to it. That is correct.
I couldn't agree more with you, Jagdish. I mean, now I know that I have another person that I have to follow, so just you have.
No, since you're mentioning it, let me say it here as well. Jagdish's wife, Lekha Ratnani, now of course, she is an equally accomplished journalist of absolutely world-class abilities.
Wow.
Not as forthcoming on camera as Jagdish and I are, but in terms of quality of the work she has done,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
we are all exactly in the same league. So
Yeah.
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
where our circle really moves around. This is what we are.
Nice.
Actually, the foundation, the Billion Press that we run as a non-profit, is her effort and her work mostly.
Wow. Okay.
And we met in the profession and were married more than 30 years ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's a
That's
journalist like
wonderful
me.
to hear. I would love to know more about her as well. So
Sure,
perhaps we
sure.
can have both of you over another time to the
Certainly,
program
Vijay.
to talk about more
Certainly.
about your foundation. But I
Sure.
completely agree with you. Before I forget, I have to mention that yes, Mayank deserves more recognition for all that he
Oh,
has accomplished in life. I agree the traditional route is quite complicated, and just the way the situation is in India, the socio-political environment and other things that kind of like reign supreme in the society, it is not always possible for an accomplished person to get that kind of a recognition. And I personally feel that about my father. I've spoken to Mayank about it too, that the kind of accomplishments he's got, he should have been in a much higher recognized.
Indeed, indeed.
I don't think.
I'd like to read about him someday. Yes,
Yeah,
certainly.
definitely. I'll share it with you, but
Sure.
not just as a daughter, but as a person, just looking from a third person perspective.
I
I feel
appreciate.
that. So I completely agree with you. And this is not the end. There's still life, and I
Of course,
always
of course.
pray, whether Mayank agrees with it or not. I always pray for Mayank's long life and healthy life.
All
So,
right.
and my family does too. So
Well, that's very. I
that
Very
really don't
nice.
know how to handle this.
no, 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 no. Please, please, Mayank, you deserve all this. So I
Uh,
think the true recognition comes from the kind of people that are your well-wishers, your
Of course, of
people
course.
who are praying for you, who are wishing you luck. I think that is what I feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, you have two right here, and I like. I'm overwhelmed by this. It's not something one thinks about at all,
Eh,
because one is so self-absorbed in many ways because of creative pursuits.
yeah,
But when one hears it, it's a very strange feeling. It's
yeah.
exhilarating at the same time. It's a bit embarrassing.
No, no, no. Please don't be. Please know that you do inspire us on an everyday basis. And that is the reason I was so relentless in
Uh,
getting you on this interview program.
so
So,
thank you.
yes, and I do request all our viewers now in the live program as well as later, if you watch this video, please go to mayankchhaya.com. Just take a look at all the great accomplishments he's done. And I'm sure he's missed quite a few there too. So, but they are quite
Very
impressive.
true. Very true.
Now, since Jagdish mentioned, and this is
Yes.
again nothing personal, but it's a philosophy that one believes in, and hence I'm mentioning it. Jagdish briefly touched upon my documentary Gandhi
Correct.
song.
Yes.
Uh, I want to highlight it a little bit, if you don't mind.
No, please. That was my next topic. So please go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. Then
Yes.
then I'll leave it to you to ask. You
Oh,
can.
no, 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 Mayank, that's fine. I wanted to really know about how it came about, what prompted you to make this. Everybody knows about Vaishnava Janato. We have all sang it as we grew up in India, but you saw it from a different point of view. You went to the roots of it. So I would like you to just describe a little bit more about your journey with that and what prompted you to make it.
Being from Gujarat, especially from Saurashtra, uh, Narsi Mehta and his bhajans were always around. Narsi Mehta is considered Gujarat's Adi Kavi, the original poet of Gujarat. In fact, he is the poet from where everything flows. We're talking about the period between 1414 and 1480. That's the most popularly accepted era of Narsi Mehta, although there are some contentions about it, but that's not relevant here. Coming to Vaishnava Janito, it is one of the world's most widely sung songs, and yet people reflexively associate that with Mohandas Gandhi as if Gandhi wrote it. People forget that the song was written about over 400 years before Gandhi was born, and it was one of Narsi Mehta's maybe hundreds of ballads and bhajans that he wrote in his life, from Sagun to Nirgun. It's quite a remarkable journey, and I picked on Vaishnava Janto for a reason, because to me it's the most remarkable secular, non-denominational standard of the way a civilized, righteous, dignified, decent human being should be, without the sanctimony of being religious or spiritual. This particular song lays down what a righteous, decent, civilized, refined human being is. And I had to tell that story. And ironically, I had to use Gandhi's name because the song is associated with Gandhi. And I used that as a peg to tell the story of Narsi Mehta. It's called Gandhi's song. It's available free on YouTube. Although, to be perfectly candid, I did try to sell it because we have invested money in it. And unfortunately, a lot of them liked it, including networks like Netflix, they all liked the documentary, but somehow in those days, I'm talking about 5, 6 years ago, it didn't fit their slate of things that they were doing. So I had to release it free on YouTube. So when you get a chance, just search for Gandhi song in YouTube, and you'll come across the 74 minutes of the story behind not just the song, but the great Narsi Mehta, whom I regard as one of the world's greatest poet philosophers. So please check it out.
I did watch it, Mayank. I agree with you. It is a fantastic documentary that you've made. It should be out there, nationally and internationally recognized. That is this song itself, as you mentioned. Many of us thought about it as Gandhi's song. As we grew up, we thought it was written by Gandhi, and I couldn't have been more wrong. So I applaud you for going to the roots and getting us the facts about this poet Narsing Mehta that we didn't know about. And many of us who are, especially not from Gujarat, we didn't know about him. So thank you for doing this. And I hope that work of yours, especially that work of yours, and also the biography of Dalai Lama and you and your accomplishments are recognized more in the future. Jagdish, would you like to add anything here?
Yes, Vijay, the point I wanted to reflect on was that do note that we all know or have at some time, as you rightly said, sung Vaishnava Janato. And Mayank is right. It is what a refined, evolved human being ought to be. And do note that Narsi Mehta was not known to you, and he was a very, very accomplished person. So it's not necessarily that accomplishments be recognized within a finite time zone that we see. Um, uh, uh, they live on and they go on to serve generations and generations. I think Narsi Mehta inspires anyone even today. A child born tomorrow will be inspired. Just imagine the line, a godly person is one who can feel the pain of another. How deep is that statement, and
Right,
how
right.
deeper can you get, and how better can you live? You yourself use the word we pray 2 3 times, and there is some spiritual bent there, and to understand what it means to live in a community with people together, and to understand the suffering of another.
Agree.
So Narsi Mehta is not well known. Gandhi popularized the song, and Mayank went on to popularize it even more. So good work does get carried forward. I'm not worried too much, though I do make the point, but I will not be worried too much about a finite time within which certain work can be recognized. I think your conversations here are very, very valuable. Bharat FM may not be the hottest channel, but it's a very important conversation, and you're
Right.
doing so many others. So we shouldn't worry too much and carry on with the work, would be
I
my
agree.
idea. As Mayank has, and Narasi Mehta's story will always be told, and good work will always be celebrated.
Right.
Right.
Just to conclude a bit from my side, sorry to butt in, Vijaya. I'm sorry
No,
about
no, not at all. Not at all.
Um,
Please.
I was deeply troubled by the institutional apathy at the level of the Indian government about when they, to celebrate 150 years of Gandhi, they spent a lot of money on producing lovely little uh, pictorial about Vaishnava Janato, which was sung by all major singers from around the world.
Mhm.
And it was a great exultation, it was great celebration. They spent the Ministry of External Affairs, I think, when the late Sushma Swaraj was the minister, they spent quite a bit of money. That little piece does not even mention Narsi Mehta. I pointed out, I said, this is tragic. And you have a prime minister who happens to be from Gujarat. And it's tragic that he continues to be ignored despite having been pointed out so many times that you're celebrating his creation without even bothering to acknowledging him. I find it tragic.
True.
Correct. Yeah. I do feel that gap in not just this case, but many others too, where unfortunately the main people that need to be given credit to are not given credit. And that's the sad reality, I guess.
Yeah.
And one may wonder whether they get the philosophy behind the song.
Right. Yes, it has got such deep meaning, and that has been so well described in the documentary. So,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
true,
that
true.
is correct.
Good.
Yeah, so I do hope everybody who's watching, and I'll also continue promoting this program, this interview after we are done as well. So I hope more and more folks go watch that documentary, get Mayank's book from Amazon. I have the audio version myself, being busy with little ones. I know I cannot sit down to read a book, but I listen to it while I'm doing my chores, while I'm driving around. So it is really an impressive book, and the depth of Mayank's knowledge is only proven when you listen to it, when you see the kind of wisdom he shared, the kind of knowledge and the depth of study that is done for each piece that he's come out with. So that is what we want more and more folks to become familiar with through this program. All right, thank you, Jagdish. If you have
Thank
any
you,
other
Vijay.
parting words,
No,
I
that's
would
it. I
actually,
think
if you don't mind, I would like to ask an important question while two
yes.
eminent journalists are here. What do you think about the journalism world today? This is like an opening like a can of worms, but I just want to know your quick viewpoint, because I remember those days when I used to sit as a little girl with my grandfather. He would watch the English news from on DD without fail every day, and he would explain to me, although I probably didn't absorb as much, but he would explain to me how, look at the newsreader, they're so elegant, so professional, and they are giving only the most important news, and he would make me more familiar with that. Nowadays I turn on any news channel, people shouting, screaming. I have no clue what's going on. There is news flash coming on the bottom, there are people talking about different things, and it's going all around the place. So I just don't know. I want to know your opinion while you're here.
So Vijay, in a line, if you ask me, I've spoken a
Yeah.
lot on this. We are in
Okay.
disaster zone. There is no question
Mm.
about it. What you're saying, the simple conversation that we have this evening, India time at least. I don't know what time it is in your side of the world, but it's so elegant. At least we can chat, and we have gone into complete disaster zone, if you ask me. The less we speak about it, the better it is. It's a complex issue, but yes, DD was probably far better, and we'd have those days back. The earlier days, Didi, I'd be happier for it.
Would you like to add anything, Mayank?
No, I completely agree with Jagdish. It's although on the one hand we are up a. I'm sorry to use the expression, but I think that perhaps sums it up. And it is a bit unrefined, but I'm going to say it nevertheless. We are up shit creek when it comes to the media, uh, not just in India, but across the world. Primarily with the rise of the political right, there has been such a commensurate decline for any respect for even those journalists who are driven purely by facts. And the thing that strikes me the most in this era of hyper frenzied social media is that people confuse having an opinion with possessing knowledge. They are not the same thing. They are
Right.
nowhere near the same thing. They have nothing to do with each other. And I find that people who pontificate on social media, drawing from the very work that diligent, serious journalists put in to produce, and these guys pretend as if they knew it. So I've had some conversation with some of those people. I said, first of all, you know it because some journalists worked on it.
Right.
On your own, you had no access, no clue, you had no idea. So at least have the decency to recognize that some fool somewhere had the commitment to do it. Anyway, this is a pretty complex subject.
Correct.
One
Yeah.
can have a 2 hour conversation on it, especially for old school print journalists like Jagdish and I. We have spent our entire lives on this. And hopefully,
Right.
someday someone will recognize the importance of having a media that is not driven by TRPs or the
Right.
ratings
Exactly.
or ideological agenda on both sides. I'm saying left liberal as well as extreme right. It both have a fundamental problem.
Yep.
I think it's also good to say, Vijay, very quickly, that it's wrong to think that you will have choice because you will have choice. You have more channels, but if they all give you the
Right.
same McDonald's, what are you
Yeah.
going to get? So choice is no choice, really. Another thing is the technology may be very valuable, and it is. I do not deny that, but that does not in itself mean what you get will be better. So,
Correct.
these
Yeah.
are two things we need to.
Yeah, I personally feel that we are overstimulated these days. We need not be. We need not have so many channels. We need not have so much influx of news, and moreover, negativity in the news is high rising. It's crazy how negative the news has
Yeah,
become.
yeah. But
Any
you might also take heart. Sorry to interject. From the
no, no,
point that
no,
not
please.
many people are watching it, and we
Yes,
may think it is. There's a lot of noise, but there is very little audience there, and
yeah.
it's depleting, and audience character is changing even more.
Yeah,
You know.
I agree. I used to think media or media person should be unbiased. But these days it's more like self propaganda, and
True.
a lot of negativity. News media or any kind of media source, for example, the printed or online, it should be a source of something added value, right? I don't see that as much
True.
happening.
True.
Just
Very
in
true.
my small
No, no, you're
I
right.
guess unimportant
No,
opinion.
not at all. In fact,
No, no,
in
no,
that
no.
context, I think that's why an outfit like the Billion Press that
Right,
Jagdish and Lekha are running, they are important because they provide substantive, well-researched pieces.
right.
There is so much crying need for that, but unfortunately, they get sidelined all the
Yep.
time.
Yep. So we will definitely have Jagdish back and your
Sure,
wife
certainly, Vijay.
also on
Certainly,
our
Vijay.
program,
Certainly.
hopefully in the new year. Thank you very
Certainly.
much for joining today.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you for having me. You
Vidya,
do you do this so well.
it
I'm
was
charmed.
very
Thank you so
generous
much.
of you to do what you did. Like you pointed out, I have resisted it for 2 years because I sincerely believe, and it's been my lifelong belief that and I'm not being, I'm not a modest man. I don't bring anything of any consequence to the human discourse. That's been my firm opinion about myself. And within that, if you manage to find an hour and a half to talk to Jagdish
Yes.
and I'm grateful. Thank you very much.
No, no, no. We will change it one day, Mayank. We'll make you believe how valuable you are.
No, no, I really don't think so.
Well, thank you very much,
Thank
Jagdish.
you.
We'll
Thank you,
see you
Vijay.
then.
Take care. Bye bye.
Greatly appreciated. All the best. Bye. Bye.
Mayank, I would like to take, although we are already half an hour more beyond our set time, if you don't mind, let us chat for 5 more minutes. Is that okay?
I'm fine with it as long as you and Manan are fine with it.
No, no, no. It's absolutely a pleasure. We know that you have escaped us for 2 years. So we would like to finish off this interview
Okay.
with the points that we have on mind. So, what prompted you to come to the US? That was one thing, because I know you had a good career going on in India with
Yeah,
journalism.
it's just the excitement of exploring something else. I had an offer to take over a local newspaper in Silicon Valley
Okay.
as its editor and maybe perhaps transform it. I tried, it worked a bit, and then one of my projects got funded by a local venture capitalist. So
Okay.
that's what kept me there.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. So, did you see a considerable difference between the way journalism was in India versus here? Just so for people who are students, perhaps students of journalism, they may be interested to know this.
All serious journalists everywhere have a similar approach to their
Yeah.
profession.
Okay.
So, to that extent, it did not. What may have changed from there to here was the ease of the infrastructure.
Okay.
I mean, one has to remember that I began my journalism in the era of the linotype machine. I'm sure people wouldn't even know what linotype machine is.
Right.
Linotype is literally they used to melt lead and make them into printing blocks,
Hmm.
which would be fixed within a sort of a rectangular frame like a newspaper page. And then they would print it with that, with the newspaper ink. I come from that era to graduate to a typewriter, then to a desktop, then to emails and internet. And I mean, I've seen the whole journey. So that was the major difference in terms of the ease of infrastructure. But more importantly, what stood out for me as a professional was in this country, when you call someone and that person said they would call you back, they meant precisely that,
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
which was not the practice for a very long time in India. In some ways, it is still not.
Hmm.
These are little, very subtle, even minor cultural differences that make your
Right.
ability to
Yeah.
perform much easier in America in some sense. Although
Correct.
now Indians have become extremely media savvy,
Hmm.
but that's from a different standpoint, not necessarily because they want to get back to you.
Yeah, yeah, that reminds me actually. My father used to say there's something similar too. The 4 years that he spent in Russia teaching yoga was worth almost like 40 years of work that he could do in India. That was the kind of convenience and encouragement and appreciation and acceptance that he got
Right.
from everybody. So in India, it can make life more challenging for people who are passionate about certain fields, especially the non-traditional ones, and try to go ahead. So thank you, Mayank, for answering that question. Now we have spoken so much about your professional life. We did have a little bit about your. We did learn a little bit about your personal life too when your daughter Haya joined us during the program. Now we have to ask you. You were so involved with your journalism career and you're moving to US. So this inevitable question coming from Indian society, right? When and how did Cupid strike?
Oh,
if you
that's
if you want to share, it's
no,
up to
I
you.
I certainly want. I wouldn't mind, but as long as I can caveat it by saying that we are no longer together. My former wife and I separated about 3 years ago. I, I would not mention the name because she is essentially a very
That's
shy person, but
no worries.
she is of Indonesian origin, born in Sri Lanka. And it happened in 1995 on a visit to Colombo, where to I was there to report the Sri Lankan presidential elections, and I was 33 already. And the joke was that Mayank uh, probably will die a virgin. Uh, and, and sorry, I'm sure our audience is completely adult. So I can say these things. In fact, my colleagues at India Abroad, very dear friends, outstanding and brilliant journalists like Tarun Basu, who was the editor in chief of India Abroad and IANS. And we used to joke, and Tarun would tell me that since you're going to Sri Lanka, Colombo especially, the best looking girls work at the Taj Samudra Hotel. So at the very least, come back with knowing someone. If you come back without any sort of interaction, I would probably scream at you. I said, Tarun, it doesn't work that way. But nevertheless, what happened was there was a curfew in Colombo those days. There was, because of the Tamil insurgency, there were problems. And the elections were threatened by some kind of security issues. I wouldn't go into those details.
Right.
So my former wife who was working for the Taj Samudra at that point, they were all staying in the hotel for that particular night. And I used to go to their business center to file my stories. And in many ways, I would come across like a nerd who is just not looking around but doing his work and moving on. And I saw that she was in discomfort of some sort. So I asked her purely out of humanity. I said, "Are you all right? You're wincing." She said, "No, I have a stomach ache." I said, "Oh, I see." I went to my room and got a couple of pudin haras. I don't know if people know what pudin
Yeah.
hara
Right.
is.
Right.
Pudin hara are these mint tablets, which mint has this quality to settle down your stomach. So I went and gave it to her, and it seemed to help. And I just forgot about it. And suddenly, around midnight, there was a knock on the door on my room at the Taj. One of her friends, who also worked at the Taj, she said, you know, you gave her something that helped her. Do you still have some more?
And you became popular, huh?
I said, I do. So I again administered that to
Right.
her.
Right.
And it worked for a bit. And that's where my story began. And I think about a month or so, we were basically together. That's how it started. So Pudin Hara of the mint tablets were the reason behind it. That was the Cupid, to answer your
Yeah.
question.
Right. Right. Very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing this story. We are having so much fun with this conversation. However, just looking at the time, we have to let you go, Mayank. We have taken so much of your time. I know how busy you are every day. So appreciate you joining, appreciate you sharing everything that we asked for from your life and more. But I do feel like there is so much more to talk about. This conversation just ends in this program right now, but really it continues. I would like to continue staying in touch with you to know more about the various works, especially, and try and help promote it as I like to do always. So, any parting thoughts that you would like to share, Mayank?
Just something that I would like to especially point out is this venture that Manan Rawal, the CEO, founder of Bharat FM, has embarked on. I think it's important that the Indian American community, as well as the expatriates around the world, pay more attention because it's taken so much out of him in terms of producing what he does. I think it's important that people patronize Bharat FM and all its other ventures. He now has a sort of a radio frequency in Cincinnati, and he runs. It's on the dial, as it were. It's on the. If you're driving in Cincinnati, you can hear Bharat FM. I think it's taken a lot of work for Manan and all of you who have been so exceptional in terms of your support to him in RJing, practically gratis. And I think it's important that all people patronize something like Bharat FM, not for what Manan has done, but the fact that there is an independent media trying to do something interesting in so many different languages.
Correct.
You're addressing in about maybe 7, 8 languages now, all
Correct.
major Indian languages. It just doesn't happen in the US. So kudos to all of you, and I hope whoever is listening, watching today would make an enlightened choice to occasionally check out Bharat FM and Bharat TV.
Thank you so much for putting a word for there, Mayank. It is actually available in the Dayton area also, as we can tune in on the radio, HD3. So that is a great accomplishment. And yes, Manan Bhai is relentless, and we'll continue supporting him with his efforts and until his dream is achieved. So we are
Thanks a
here.
lot. No,
Yeah.
thank you very much. I'm touched by your attention, and I had a wonderful time talking to you.
Thank you, Mayank. And before we end the program, I would definitely like to show these pictures, if possible, from the slides that we have made, just to tell a little bit more a story of you visually. So, this was Mayank at 14 years. I wonder what he used to think about his life then.
Oh, interesting you should ask. I was about to mention that I've been writing poetry since the age of 13.
Wow.
So this is a year after that, and I have a vivid memory of my very first verse that I wrote. I remember it without any problems. It went something like this. I was looking at the main door of my home in Ahmedabad as a 13-year-old, and this is what I wrote. It's in Hindi Urdu. It says, "दरवाजा देखता हूँ मैं, दरवाजा देखता हूँ मैं कि कोई अपना आए, दरवाजे से डरता हूँ मैं कि आके वो न जाए."
Oh.
That's all I wrote at that point. And then since then, I have written hundreds of, maybe perhaps it touches a couple of thousand, maybe even more. I've lost count because I write on all kinds of scraps of paper and elsewhere.
And you write every day. So it
Yes,
keeps
I mean,
adding.
yeah, it's sort of a reflex action now. So
Right, right.
I
Yeah, no,
thoroughly
those
enjoy that.
definitely, yes. There are a lot of your fans and patrons around, and just at 14 years, those words are so deep, so meaningful, amazing.
Thank
Now,
you. And
just
Vijaya, just to conclude,
sure.
you had mentioned at the early part of the conversation about my mother, Snellata.
Yes,
If you don't mind, I would like to end with something that I wrote, just 2 lines.
for sure.
When
Please,
she died at age 87.
please.
She lived a wonderful life. I think it was time for her to go. I told her as much. In fact, she suffered a bit after an accident. So I told her in my last conversation that, Ma, please wrap it up now. You should go. And she did a week later. And this is what I wrote at that. Normally, my poetry is about nothing in particular. It doesn't come from any set of emotions at all. But there are a few verses which come from my very personal thinking. This is one of them. And I would like to conclude with that. Just 2 lines, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
It says, "Tu to chali maa, bina mujhse पूछे, तू तो चली माँ बिना मुझसे पूछे, बिना तुझसे पूछे चलने का हक सिर्फ मेरा था."
Wow. Wow.
Thank you.
Simply wow, Mayank. And I think those words were perfect to conclude our conversation for today. So thank you very much once again. Very meaningful words, beautiful words. We'll continue to check out your posts on social media and we'll continue to follow you. Appreciate you taking so much time to join us today.
Thank you so much. And I'm touched. And thank you, Manan. Mariye.
Take care, Mayank.
You too. All the best.
Best wishes.
My best to your family, Vijaya.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayank. Same to
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I know this program continued for almost 2 hours today, but as you could tell, our guest was very special and he has so many accomplishments that we are yet to discover more and more of. So let us continue the conversation another time. If you have any questions for him, please do reach out to him. You can directly contact him through mayankchhaya.com website. So until the next time, we will please stay healthy. We will see you in our next episode. Stay healthy, stay happy. Take care. Namaste.
Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, welcome and adab. You are listening to Bharat FM, a one-of-its-kind, multilingual, eclectic provider of entertainment, information and news to Indian Americans. Headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, Bharat FM airs shows out of Cincinnati, Chicago and Phoenix. We take pleasure in our ability to cater to your bhakti, chusti, sphurti, shakti and masti needs with our audio and visual shows. Check out bharatfm.com for our online program schedule and archives. I'm sure the content will definitely tickle your senses. Tune in via the 24-hour web streaming on bharatfm.com or via the Bharat FM app. More information can be procured at 513-488-5070.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.